This for you in case you can't see it. Now, suppose we live in a world where there are two distinct groups of people: persons with disabilities, represented by a circle on the left, and persons without disabilities, represented by a circle on the right. For persons with disabilities to be included in our world, you would have to bring the two circles together. But there are two ways to bring these two circles together, so that there is an overlap, and when there is an overlap, there is inclusion that takes place. One way is for the left circle to move to the right, or essentially have persons with disabilities adapt to the normal world we live in. Much of the typical world we live in today require persons with disabilities to adapt to us. That's why it's often said that it's not the disabilities themselves that disable, but rather society's attitudes towards persons with disabilities. This expectation that persons with disabilities adapt to our way of life is what we might term as the process of normalization. But there is a better way to achieve inclusion, which is to move the right circle to overlap with the left. But to do this, the rest of us who do not have to face the daily challenges of living with disabilities would have to commit to making the necessary accommodations to ensure that the PWDs can be in our midst, accessing opportunities for the same quality of life that the rest of us enjoy. Now, let me share a personal example to illustrate this. In the past, when my son Evan was much younger and his challenges arising from his autism was not so severe, we used to go on family holidays yearly. But when we travel, we would have to pack two important items in our luggage. Can you guess what they are? Well, one item is an electric convection cooker. Because he's on a special diet, because he has a gluten-free, casein-free diet. And so when we travel, he can't eat much of what is readily available in our travels. And the second item is a waterproof bedsheet, because he wasn't toilet trained till he was a teenager. So for him to be a part of our family vacations, we would have to make special effort to include him. Now that's an example at a personal level. At a professional level, work in the disability sector that I'm in is really hard. Funding is limited, finding committed and compassionate staff is always a challenge. And those of us working in the sector sometimes feel as if the problems that we face are intractable. Why is that so? Why does this happen in Singapore? Perhaps because working in the disability sector is not often seen as a career of choice. And policymakers themselves may not always have a complete understanding of what it takes to help persons with disabilities, particularly those on a more severe end of the disability spectrum, to help them live dignified lives. What both the personal and the systemic examples that I've quoted demonstrate is that for inclusion to work for persons with disabilities, the rest of us, indeed the whole society, have to make effort and expend resources in order to fully include them. Now, you can substitute persons with disabilities with other disadvantaged groups in our society: the poor, widows and orphans, migrant workers, at-risk youth, and the same principle will apply. If we truly mean to be inclusive, then the majority of us who are not disadvantaged need to take that initiative to make the adjustments that are needed to include the disadvantaged in society. But the key question is this: why is it so hard for us in Singapore to be truly inclusive? Why is it so hard to practice inclusion in Singapore? Now, I'm not smart enough or wise enough to figure out the whole answer to this difficult question. But perhaps the Harvard philosopher, Professor Michael Sandel, might be able to shed some light. And this is one of his quotes. He says, "As meritocracy intensifies, the striving so absorbs us that our indebtedness recedes from view. In this way, even a fair meritocracy, one without cheating or bribery or special privileges for the wealthy, induces the mistaken impression that we have made it on our own. Now let me try and unpack this quote for us very quickly. When our society measures our worth by our intelligence, by our capabilities, or by our talents, and access to those opportunities are then distributed based on these measures of worth, then those of us who benefit from these opportunities, and I myself included, would tend to forget that our intelligence, our capabilities, and our talents are God-given. Or, for those who do not believe in God, perhaps a function of luck or chance. And when we forget that our talents are God-given or simply down to good fortune, we will forget to be grateful for the opportunities we are given. And when we forget to be grateful and we think we have made it on our own, we will be much less generous. We will think that we deserve what we have been given, and those that are not doing so well, it's their own fault. So for those of us who are doing relatively well, myself included, it is useful to remind ourselves that our lives would be very different if we were born in a part of the world that was very poor and perhaps doesn't even have access to clean water. Meritocracy can therefore cause us to be less grateful than we ought to be, and as a result, less generous with those who have less. So, what should all that I've shared mean for all of you? For those of you who choose to work in helping professions or the social sector, and I hope and I believe there will be many of you, you will likely encounter many challenges when you start work. Challenges that may seem unsolvable. You may be frustrated because you want to make a positive difference in the lives of the others that you serve. But systemic limitations may constrain you. Understand this. Although it is true that behind these challenges lies a larger system which you may not be able to influence at first. But wherever you are, you can always start with simply remembering to be grateful. And if you do, you may one day be promoted to a point where you can exercise greater influence. 25 years later, like me. For the psychologists in particular, I hope you will put your skills to work in the sectors that help others. And please, resist the temptation to go into the private sector for higher pay or an easier life when you achieve your registration. But my main message today is simply this: be grateful. Be grateful because you have come so far in life, not simply because you worked hard. I'm sure you did. But because you are blessed with more than others have been blessed with. Be grateful because your parents, your teachers, and society at large have invested in you and helped you to this point. Many others in Singapore and in other parts of the world, and indeed in the whole of life, have not been so blessed. Put your talents and your knowledge to work in service of others, and especially in service of the disadvantaged. And if you do so, you will find in another 25 years or so, when you get to my age now, you can look back and say, maybe I've not made as much money as I could have made, but I've certainly lived a very meaningful life. You will find the truth that it is indeed more blessed to give than to receive. Thank you.